Hello everyone. It's my great honor and pleasure to contribute to the lecture series at the Complutense University in Madrid. I'd like to thank Professor Asen Lopez Varela for her kind invitation to share my research with you. I'm Professor Xiaojue Wang, and my research focuses on modern Chinese literature, culture, and comparative literature. And I serve as a professor at Rutgers University in the United States of America. Today, my topic is Eileen Chang and the radioscape in post-war Hong Kong. Wang Kaiwai's 2000 film In the Mood for Love has a now classic scene set in a rental building in 1962 Hong Kong. The sequence begins with a long panning shot of a tube radio set. In the close-up shot, as a camera slowly pans over the smooth surface of the radio, on the soundtrack, the female voice of the program announces that the traveling businessman Mr. Chen requested a song for his wife to convey birthday wishes. The song that plays is the recording of 花样的年华, Blooming Years, performed by Zhou Xuan, a beloved movie and singing star of the 1930s and 40s Shanghai. As the familiar tune brings the audience back to the good old days of Republican Shanghai, the camera moves to Mrs. Chen sitting alone in the kitchen, leaning against the wall. Then it moves to the left to show Mr. Zhou, her neighbor and love interest, on the opposite side of the wall. The film, In the Mood for Love, tells the story of a married man, Mr. Zhou, and a married woman, Mrs. Chen, living in rented neighboring rooms of a Tanglo-style apartment building, falling in love with each other while dealing with the infidelities of their respective spouses, whom they discover are having an affair with each other. It provides a nostalgic look at the 1960s Chinese migrant communities in Hong Kong, when the Cold War division in Asia forced millions of Chinese from mainland China into the British colony of Hong Kong, and when Chinese traditional culture coexisted with the fragmenting forces of modernity. The song Blooming Years was originally featured in the 1947 movie 长相思, An All-Consuming Love, as it conveys sentiments of family separation, homesickness, pains of exile and uprootedness during the Second Sino-Japanese War. The song very well speaks to the diasporic condition of mainland Chinese in Hong Kong, when the 1949 divide in China brought an even deeper sense of severance and displacement to Chinese people. Through the radio sound wave, Zhou Xuan's singing voice, rendering the ambience of old Shanghai, streams into the convoluted hallways across separate apartments divided to house multiple migrant families. The sequence not only points to the themes of family relations and ethics, passion, betrayal, and regrets, but also shows how the prevalent medium of radio created an acoustic imprint of that very era for the immigrant community in particular, lamenting over an unattainable homeland. As the film director Wang Kaiwai remarked in an interview, post-war Hong Kong was an era of radio. How did radio shape the sonic Sinophone landscape in post-war Hong Kong? How did its popularization affect the mode of communication among people in the colony? With the unprecedented mass migration and transnational flows of resources, consumer goods, technologies, and ideas, how would this form of technologized sound medium contribute to the assumption, consolidation, or subversion of new identities and subjectivities within or across borders? How did it affect human relationships and family ethics? My talk today will consider these questions through a tuning in to the radioscape of the 1950s and 60s Hong Kong, and in particular through an examination of Eileen Chang's cross-media cultural practice. In 1950s Hong Kong, the vibrant radio programming and its wide accessibility contributed to the identity formation of a newly emergent Sinophone community. There were 3 radio stations during that time: the colonial government's official broadcasting station, Radio Hong Kong; the wired Radio Rediffusion; and later Hong Kong Commercial Radio. They brought robust, diverse programming, news, current affairs, sky fiction, radio drama, and a variety of music programs broadcast in English, Cantonese, Mandarin, and other Chinese dialects. Listening to radio constructed an integral part of daily lives of the mainland émigré, as well as local communities. Tuning in to a beloved program in the scheduled time in the living room, in the common lounge of a crowded rental house, at the food stand or tea shop created a specific form of communal space and a sense of unity, connection, and communication. As Anthony Storr observed in Music in the Mind, I quote, "At the emotional level, there is something deeper about hearing than seeing, and something about hearing other people which fostered human relationships even more than seeing them." Unquote. Listening to one specific program airing at a specific time constructed a shared simultaneity of experience, which is crucial to Benedict Anderson's concept of modern imagined communities. Instead of a single auditory national culture, the radioscape in post-war Hong Kong was marked by its cultural and linguistic diversity. Let's look at some popular radio programs. First was radio drama, including traditional storytelling, sky fiction with one single-person narrator, and dramatized radio plays featuring multiple performers. Traditional storytelling, such as Fang Rong's Jianggu storytelling, was mostly adapted from vernacular fictions, especially historical tales, martial arts, adventures, and court case novels. It marked an auditory continuity with the pre-1949 popular culture in South China, not just because it's delivered in Cantonese, but also because it illustrates traditional moral and cultural virtues, such as justice, filial piety, integrity, and courage. These storytelling programs were recorded and transmitted to local radios in Macau, Singapore, Malaya, and other Southeast Asian Chinese communities and created a sense of cultural China on the air. The 2015 Singapore film 3688, directed by Royston Chan, portrays a striking father character dubbed Uncle Radio by his neighbors, who suffers from dementia and wanders from door to door trying to sell 1950s rediffusion radio receivers that have already disappeared in contemporary Singapore. For Uncle Radio and people of his generation, however, the vanishing sound wave of Li Dasha's storytelling still lingers in their mind of a bygone era. A second major type of radio drama was the sky fiction, or airwave novels, which often concerned with contemporary themes. Many sky fiction stories dealt with problems caused by recent Chinese civil war and national divide, such as family separation, loss, infidelity and betrayal, migration, poverty, and resettlement. Li Wu's radio drama Mayflowers in the Rain presents a fine example. This sky fiction was later adapted onto the big screen in 1960 by the director Qin Jian. Here what we have is a film poster which highlights a series of buzzwords to appeal to the audience, including family, ethics, love, and grand tragedy. What was circulated and shared in the listening community were not just melodramatic stories, but also ethical values and mediated cultural tensions, which were much needed in a transitional society longing for post-war restoration and stability. For recent mainland Chinese emigre, the beloved radio program was Mandarin modern songs called 时代曲, which, together with Cantonese opera, took more than half of the on-air hours of Radio Hong Kong's 1950s program. What we have here is a program timetable for Rediffusion's silver and gold channels on November 27, 1956. From a daily program starting 7 a.m. through midnight, 时代曲 takes up about 2 hours of the 17-hour broadcasting time. 时代曲 prevailed in Republican Shanghai originally and turned into a sonic, expressive form in the growing cosmopolitan Hong Kong with the promotion of the Pathé Records, the NPNGI, and Shaw Brothers Mandarin Cinema. The radio sequence in Wang Kai-wai's film In the Mood for Love that we just discussed at the beginning of today's talk provides a good example of how this form of popular music circulates on air. The 1960s witnessed a growing interest in studying the material and technological aspects of mass communication, a field that we later call media studies. Why that particular time period, we may wonder. As Eric Havelock recounted, scholars of the 1960s, like himself, who got interested in the topic of orality and communication, belonged to the first generation of listeners acoustically nurtured on shortwave broadcasts at a time marked by new ways of recording, storing, and transmitting sounds and voices. Marshall McLuhan's iconic line in his 1964 work, Understanding Media, The Extensions of Man, Medium is the Message, proposes that medium not to be considered as a transparent tool to mediate the message. Rather, the medium itself and mediality becomes the subject matter of research. In Requiem for Media, Baudrillard clarifies that the medium is a message operates a transfer of meaning onto the medium itself qua technological structure. What Baudrillard maintains is that media are not neutral technological systems whose social impact depends on who uses them to say what. Rather, it was in their form and very operation that they induce social relations, or, as later stated by Friedrich Kittler, media determine our situation. Regarding the mediascape of post-war Hong Kong, particularly its radio culture, we may wonder why and how media in their forms and technologies and their operation affected and shaped new ideas, perceptions of time and space, and human behavior and relationships. Although never a scholar of media and communication herself, the renowned woman writer Zhang Ailing, or Eileen Chang, offered fascinating thoughts on these questions in her multimedia cultural practice as a writer, a film critic, and a screenwriter. I will now turn to the 1962 NPNGI film, 南北一家亲, The Greatest Wedding on Earth, directed by Wang with Eileen Chang serving as a screenwriter to see how Chang explores the impact of media on everyday life, human relations, and family ethics. First, a brief introduction of this prominent writer, whose translingual and transgeneric cultural career spanned the Chinese mainland, Hong Kong, Taiwan, and the United States of America. Eileen Chang is regarded as one of the foremost Chinese authors of the 20th century. As someone who uses both English and Chinese, Chang's work is still less well known internationally than it deserves. Born into a distinguished family, her great-grandfather was Li Hongzhang, a legendary statesman and the chief architect of foreign policy in the late Qing dynasty. Chang grew up in the dual atmosphere of traditional Chinese high culture and the increasing allure of the West. She achieved great literary fame in occupied Shanghai during the Second Sino-Japanese War with her short story collection, Romances, an essay collection written on water, 1944, which represents some of her best works. Chang wrote about quotidian lives in order to explore human nature and frailty, which undercut the grand narratives of nationalism, patriotism, and revolution in mainstream Chinese literature. Focusing on characters from declining aristocratic families stranded in the transition to modernity, her early works established an aesthetic of everyday life marked by a pervasive mood of desolation. Due to her ambiguous political stance, she was virtually erased from official literary history after the People's Republic of China was founded in 1949. In 1952, she left Shanghai for Hong Kong and eventually for the United States, where she led a reclusive life until she passed away in 1995. Here we have book covers of her early books, Romances and Written on Water. Except for a brief visit to Taiwan and Hong Kong in the early 1960s, Eileen Chang never again returned to China. During her 3-year sojourn in Hong Kong, she wrote 2 English-language novels, The Rice Sprout Song and Naked Earth, commissioned by the United States Information Service. Both novels bear the imprint of anti-communist propaganda. After moving to America, she finished a 3rd novel in English, Pink Tears, which returns to her familiar topic about family everyday life. The book was published by the London-based Castle & Company in 1967 with a revised title, The Rouge of the North. Although she never stopped writing, it was the last English-language fiction she published during her lifetime. C.T. Hsia's high attention to Eileen Chang since the 1960s served as a catalyst for a subsequent surge of academic research on this writer in Hong Kong, Taiwan, as well as abroad, which was followed by the resurrection of Chang's work in mainland China in the 1980s. In his influential 1961 work, A History of Modern Chinese Fiction, 1917 to 1957, Hsia devotes an entire chapter to Eileen Chang, the best and most important writer in Chinese today. On Li's 2007 film, Lust Caution, adapted from Chang's short story of the same name, and the posthumous publication of her autobiographical novels, The Fall of the Pagoda, Book of Change in English, and Xiao Tuan Yuan, or Little Reunion in Chinese, propelled a resurgence of this writer's popularity as well as scholarly revaluation of her later work. Eileen Chang's cross-media works, including films, plays, and radio dramas, have been less well-studied. She was an inveterate enthusiast for new media. Chang not only contributed film reviews to Chinese and English journals in Shanghai during the 1940s, but also wrote scripts in post-war Shanghai and later in Hong Kong and America. In 1955, she had joined the script committee of NPNGI, which comprised a group of exile writers from mainland China. From 1947 to 1964, Chang wrote 14 scripts. Films such as 太太万岁 Long Live the Wife 1947, 情场如战场 The Battle of Love 1957, and 小儿女 Father Takes a Bride 1963 are sophisticated comedies and urban romances that combine elements taken from what some critics called American screwball comedy and Chinese family drama with an ethical dimension. Chang's NPNGI films, together with other Hong Kong Mandarin Chinese films, were circulated as part of the emerging world cinema at the newly established Asian Film Festival and participated in the process of creating Hong Kong as a place of worldly engagement, routed to other non-communist regions across the Cold War integrated Free Asia. Eileen Chang, together with a number of film directors, developed a film style that not only promotes key values of modernization, worldly consciousness, and border-crossing mobility, but also attends to the impact of media on gender sensibility and family ethics in the changing society of Hong Kong. In the 1962 film, The Greatest Wedding on Earth, this film offers a fine case in point. It is an urban comedy set in the late 1950s Hong Kong. A Cantonese-speaking young man, Shen Qingwen, falls in love with Li Manling, who has migrated from Chinese mainland with her family after 1949. The romance encounters a series of obstacles from the parental side due to the cultural conflicts between the Mandarin Chinese-speaking Northerners and the Cantonese-speaking native Hong Kong families. The mainlander, Manling, speaks both Mandarin and Cantonese fluently and works at a local radio station as host for a Cantonese talk show, Happy Families, which helps people through their family issues and offers advice. Qingwen's father, who objects his sons dating any mainlander girls, was a faithful fan of Manling's show and tuned into it every day. Thanks to radio's wireless transmission of voice, Qingwen's father did not realize that the radio host was not from local Hong Kong. In the film, through the radio program, the mainlander's voice in the most intimate and inclusive tone invades the living room. Manling's radio talk, with the moral and cultural values it transmits, supplements or sometimes challenges the paternal authoritative voice in the Shen family. When he first met Manling as his son's girlfriend, Qingwen's father felt as if he had known this girl for a long time. Only later in the film did he realize that his original déjà vu impression was actually déjà entendu. Manling is the host of his favorite radio show. It was the oral familiarity rather than the visual that gave him a sympathetic feeling about the girl. The merging of the acoustic Manling with the corporeal one exposed her identity as a mainlander, which provoked Qingwen's father and broke off Manling and Qingwen's engagement. In this light, the space-transcending quality of the medium of radio, together with its location at the center of the family circle, holds out both promise and threat. The comedy centers on the cultural antagonism between the Mandarin speakers and the native Cantonese speakers through a series of dialect jokes and colloquial humor. With Cantonese being the lingua franca in Hong Kong, accurate linguistic utterances become immediate indicators of group affiliations and enable effective communication in human relations. What has been conveyed in the movie is not just tensions and clashes between different dialect-speaking people, but also the tension between conventional forms of communication via spoken language and new forms of technologized communication by modern sound media. The effectiveness or ineffectiveness of communication was also facilitated by the emergent modern media. The mediation of radio in the film, for instance, reveals how the operation of modern media technology might engender a new notion of orality and communication that helps create human understandings across linguistic and cultural barriers in post-war Hong Kong, a meeting and blending site of a multitude of different cultures, dialects, languages, and identities. A number of sequences portray the competition of the technologized sounds in the Shen living room. The typewriter, telephone, and radio, interspersed with arguing voices among family members. One of the major Shen family living room scenes begins with a close-up shot of a tube radio, with Manling's voice on the soundtrack hosting the Happy Family show. The camera then cuts to Qingwen's father sitting next to the radio, listening to his favorite host talking about the importance of following the advice of one's parents. Manling's voice on air was interfered by a loud typing noise coming from the other end of the living room. As the camera pans across the room to track the source of the dissonant, competing sound, we see the daughter Pei Ming working at her typewriter, a modern profession for young women at that time. The father requested her to stop disrupting his radio show and join him to listen to some good sense of ethical practice. The camera moves to the center of the living room, showing the father and the daughter confronted in argument, the mother sitting quietly in the back, and Manling's feminine, persuasive voice channeled by the radio saying that kids need to conform to their parents. Here, the mother's conventional role as a mediating the family was replaced by the radio voice. In the next scene, the telephone rings abruptly from the console table next to the drawer. Pei Ming ran over and started chatting with her friend about the Latin music in a newly released film. The use of high-contrast side lighting projects her shadow on the wall, suggesting a doppelganger theme converted acoustically to electronic signals from the other end of the telephone cables. Now the phone conversation almost entirely drowned the radio show. The father got infuriated and started to scold her daughter as a defiant child of a new era. The sonic interaction and competition in this sequence, affected by modern media of sound transmission, points to the clash of cultural and ethical values between generations, which were at the center of the film to portray a transitional time in Hong Kong. On the other hand, however, what Eileen Chang seeks to tease out in this sequence is also the impact of media on configuring people's communication and relationships. It's not merely what ethical values the media transmit by whom to whom, but more interestingly, how the operation of new media of sound transmission and oral communication shaped the way people conceive family relationships, cultural and dialect conflicts, and the modern cosmopolitan urban identity in Hong Kong. With the radio at the center, the typewriter and the telephone on either side of the room, the family living room turned into a battleground of technologized sounds, as well as a testing ground of new ideas and relations. To quickly sum up today's talk, through the discussion of radio culture in post-war Hong Kong and Eileen Chang's film, The Greatest Wedding on Earth, when talk today sought to examine the dynamic radioscape in post-war Hong Kong and how modern media shaped new ways of communication and human relationships. The prosperity of vibrant radio programs in multiple languages and Chinese dialects contributed to the formation of post-war communities. From sky fiction to popular music, from storytelling to radio drama, Hong Kong airwaves helped reflect on social and cultural problems caused by both recent national divide and Hong Kong's economic takeoff. Eileen Chang's film demonstrates how modern media such as radio, telephone, and typewriter took on a pivotal role in building closer and stronger ties across cultural and linguistic differences, as well as fostering a new sense of modern subjectivity. Modern modes of technologized communication via sound media join force in the diverse dialect soundscape in Hong Kong, facilitating new channels of communication, new forms of human relations, and identities in its post-war transitional time of assimilation and modernization. Thank you so much for your attention.